So we have a chance for Q&A today. Please type in questions that you would like to ask or subjects you would like to discuss, and we will talk. The plan has been to move through different subjects in P.A. Payuto's Buddha Dhamma, but Ajahn Kobilo had to duck out early to this live stream, and so I didn't quite have a chance to prepare anything specific. I can speak on a few things, but I might begin with questions and then move on to other subjects of my own choosing if questions fade or dip in frequency. Question: why does the mind slip away from meditation objects or a meditation object? How to hold on to meditation object? There's a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha compares a monk to basically a cook. And he says that just as a bad cook wouldn't notice his master's preference for salty or sweet or spicy, even so a monk may remain focused on any one of the four foundations of mindfulness, and a monk, any practitioner here, and yet not become calm. So why is that? He says, because that foolish practitioner, foolish bhikkhu, does not take note of his own mind. So a large part of how we find, I think it's a good metaphor because it brings to mind this concept and the importance of interest, of finding flavor in your meditation, and honestly of a degree of playfulness. Often how meditation is taught is to bring awareness to a single object, whether that be a mantra, a single point of breath, even dry insight, sort of a noting practice. And there's not a lot you can do with that. And often if the mind is a mind inclined towards thinking, as many of ours are in the modern age, the only thing that will keep it with a subtle object right off the bat, like the breath, is the willpower. And that is a failing and limited tool. So the word for zeal or Dhammic energy in the canon, one term is chanda, which can variously be translated as desire or zeal, but it's generally wholesome, although there are versions of it in compound words such as kama chanda, which imply sensual desire. But much of the time it's used in contrast to tanha, which is thirst, craving. So zeal is this interest, this, I think it's more associated with producing. So when you approach meditation in this sort of playful way, when you have an interesting meditation object, that's what brings to mind zeal and interest and playfulness and fun, which makes it a lot easier to keep the mind with the object because it's interesting. One good point to note here is that often the Buddha would speak about in one sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 44, the objects of concentration are defined as the foundations of mindfulness. And these are often construed as domains. Ajahn Chah would often say samadhi isn't so much like holding a bird in your hands. It's more like this basket you put over a chicken. In Thailand, they have these sort of cages, and they can be quite large, and the chicken can run around in it a little bit. All to say that understanding that a meditation object or a meditation domain can be a bit broader than just sort of one quote unquote object. The object, for example, can be the whole field of the body, which gives you a lot more room to play. You can visualize the breath as a white mist coming in and out of different parts of the body and nourishing it as you inhale and exhale. You can imagine, say, warm butter dripping down your head, down your neck, over your shoulders, and just relaxing the energy down into your chest and torso. So you can play a lot with that, which makes it more interesting and fun. To do that, you need a broader conception of what meditation is. And you need at least some strata of your meditation, which is a wider domain. I think it's very useful to think of our practice as a stratified path. So sometimes you'll need a very coarse, broad object if the mind's very energetic. So that could be something like this wide field of the body that you can move through. You can imagine drawing up sort of breath and energy from the ground. You can imagine breathing into your shoulder blades. Ajahn Nisabho does that. And nourishing the shoulder blades with sort of this breath energy. That sort of robust, stable foundation of your meditation could be chanting in your head. It could be a metta practice. All of these are very active and stable and sort of not very refined in the sense if the metta practice is visualization, for example. And then as the mind becomes more calm, it will become less interested in that broader object, say the metta visualization. Say you're bringing to mind someone you're having difficulty with on their deathbed or as a child and holding their hand, saying, may they be well. After a time, maybe the mind actually gets this glow of loving kindness of its own accord. And the visualization feels like too much. It's too coarse. At that moment, you can drop it and move up to a more rarefied meditation object. Say just that one word, which you drop into the meditation every 10 seconds. And then as the mind becomes calmer, every 30 seconds. And then maybe after a time, you only need to say the word love or friendship or forgiveness every 60 seconds. And just let that glow of loving kindness kind of sustain. Or maybe that more subtle object is that single point of the breath, being very careful to trace its thread. And, even at a more coarse or robust level of practice might be something like walking meditation, qigong, actually chanting, not just in your head, memorizing suttas. So I bring this all up because often people's minds slipping from their meditation object comes from them wanting to approach a rarefied strata of their meditation before they're ready. If I tell you to become calm, you can try to relax, or I can make you do pull-ups until you collapse and you'll be as calm as you've ever been. So by approaching these robust, stable, interesting meditation objects or domains first, before moving to the more subtle objects, you allow yourself to the mind to be interested if it's still has very active and has energy, and then it won't slip as easily. And then when it becomes calm, then you move to the more subtle level. Yeah. So I think all that is it. Those are very useful reasons to cultivate a broader idea of breath meditation that involves the whole body, because it's a very broad and playful domain. I'd also mention that how they train AI is by having two AI agents play against each other, or an AI agent play against itself. And that's how they get flexible. Similarly, in a sense, meditation is us playing against ourselves. We have our dharmic side, but the defilements, our will to attach, is a side of us we have too. And those elements utilize the same faculties in terms of our intelligence. It's like when you try to talk yourself into doing something you shouldn't do. And I think most of us have the experience of coming to an object, say a phrase of metta that works very well for a few days, and then suddenly it doesn't because the defilements figure it out and they block that. And so you have to figure out a new technique. And in a sense, you're playing against yourself. And this is how you develop intuitive dharmic intelligence, is you figure out routes and strategies and skillful means, upaya, we call them. And that's an ethic of play, and it's interesting. But once again, it requires more of a tool belt than a single meditation word or a single point of the breath. Venerable, following deep meditation, I frequently experience an afterglow. However, sometimes my mind becomes more unsettled and emotional. Can you share some reflections on this? Thank you. This is a pretty important question. And it doesn't just come up in individual sessions of meditation. What will often happen is you'll be in a meditation retreat for 5 or 6 days, and then you'll find the mind just doesn't want to go back to a samadhi object. It's like the glass is full, or you are just hitting your head against a wall. And there is an afterglow. But this is where meditation instructions in modern circles of the West have, I think, really done a disservice by not teaching a certain technique. And in many contexts, the distinction between samatha, tranquility meditation, and vipassana, insight, is a unimportant distinction. For example, when you practice mindfulness of breathing or meditation, as I just spoke about, with that stratified approach, you're really using insight at the same time as samatha, tranquility. You bring the mind to an object, say loving kindness, then you apply the Four Noble Truths in the sense of you see the dukkha in that coarse object. You feel how holding a visualization in your mind feels unnecessary and too weighty. So you drop it and you move to a more refined object and you stay with that. And that's vipassana. That's applying the Four Noble Truths, seeing dukkha, letting go of its cause, craving, and moving on to cessation. And it's intimately related with calm. You're sort of climbing this ladder of subtle states. And Ajahn Chah would say samatha and vipassana are like two sides of the same stick. You can't pick up one without picking up the other. That being said, there's context where the distinction is very important. Because often, say even breath practice, like I just talked about, is based on a very clear intention to bring the mind to refined states of calm, that samatha, tranquility meditation. But there will come a point where you can't do it anymore. Either you rest in calm for a long time or a short time, and the mind might have a lot of energy, but it begins to move inexorably. It does not want to go back to its object. And this is where you can apply vipassana, insight, in its most potent form, which is asubha, contemplation of the not sexually attractive nature of the body. And I know this is sort of anathema to many modern meditators because they haven't really heard of it. It sounds esoteric and strange. But this is the practice emphasized by almost every Thai forest master I know, is looking into the body. And it's also everywhere in the suttas. It's been kind of glossed over because it's not as romantic to think about your kidney as it is to spread loving kindness to all beings. But it's really important. The Buddha taught this object. It's the first The first 5 objects we're given as monastics upon ordination is the 5 external parts of the body. The Buddha taught this meditation object before he taught breath meditation. And what you have to realize is the body of all the 5 khandhas, the aggregates of body, feeling, perception, sankhara, formations, and consciousness. The body's the most coarse and visible, and in many senses, our attachment to it is so deep we don't even realize. And all of our defilements are kind of entwined in it. And so it's really important to lighten and loosen our grip on it. And often breaking through that khandha of the body, seeing through it as not self, as not under our control, as just something we're borrowing, is paramount to stream entry. At least often it ushers into stream entry, the first level of awakening. It's such a powerful insight. So when the mind begins moving with this afterglow, try looking at the body. If you've never done it before, it'll be a bit strange. But what you can do is go to a online information packet on access to insight called Bag of Bones. It involves all these contemplations. You can look at an autopsy. I've been to several. As a monastic in Thailand, you get to actually go to autopsies and watch as the mind, basically you take an object, the bones are very useful, and just contemplate. And that can mean something different for everyone. But, perhaps you think about how the bones are just the same as the rocks around you, as stone. They're just calcium. You could imagine the skin as oily. Why is that? Why is it that if a hair drops from your head into food, the food becomes disgusting? It's on us. And then when it's not on us, it's gross. And there's numerous ways you can contemplate. That book, Bag of Bones, or that PDF is very useful. But basically, you'll find one contemplation that the mind's really interested in. And if you gain this sense of coolness from the practice of the mind becoming bright, that's a good sign. If you're an aversive character and find it makes you grumpy, stop. But when you've done this, it's as if you're pouring that glass full of samadhi into the Vipassana glass, and it will feel right. You'll be interested. It'll be fun, as strange as that sounds, because you're not cultivating a negative body image. Negative body image is comparing your body to other bodies and seeing it as ugly compared. Real asubha is just seeing all bodies as just what they are, like strange kind of compilations of elements of water, earth, all these they're just kind of awkward things, and they're not beautiful in a sexual sense. They're not sexually attractive. So that's what you do when the mind is bright, powerful. Use the afterglow to contemplate the body, and it will rip apart the sense of self in this nitty-gritty way that all those sort of high-minded koans, I just don't. It's not romantic, but give it a try and see how it feels. And once you've done that for a while and the mind has lost interest, you'll get to go back into samadhi without much trouble. It's kind of like, it's difficult. It's like the 2 feet you're walking with is samatha and then body contemplation a little bit in appropriate measure. And what's so difficult is that when you don't teach the body contemplation at all, it's a bit like people are trying to hop on one foot. You need that other foot because it will let you reapproach samadhi practice. You once mentioned the loss of ceremony during the Reformation. How can we as a lay sangha cultivate ceremony, especially when practicing together as a group? Charles, so great question. I've mentioned this before in the sense that in the West, we understand internal inclination affecting external action, What we've forgotten, you like someone, so you give them something. What we've forgotten is that external action, embodied action, affects internal inclination, which is that when you bow, it really affects how you feel about what you bow to over the years. And that's the point of ritual and ceremony. So in the Reformation, I think I was more referencing a bit of our loss of monastics, but we did lose a lot of ritual then too. And not that the Catholic Church didn't need to be reformed, but bringing back in ritual, I think first requires us to conceive of it appropriately. These are skillful means. It's just a statue. Bowing, it's just a motion. There's no real inherent power to these things. In fact, the Buddha, as many of you know, cited attachment to rites and rituals as a hindrance and a fetter. But if we use them as tools to train ourselves, they are very powerful. And having like a clearly defined schedule in a day, and certain motions that we can partake of, give us the necessary security day to day, moment to moment, such that we're actually able to dive into the storm of what we see when we look clearly at our hearts and when we begin to see through many of the things we've clung to. It really helps to have structure and ritual to hold you through that storm. So, as a lay sangha, I think many of the tools the Buddha gave are underutilized. The Uposatha day, making that a daily thing, the precepts. There's stories in the Buddha's time of laymen who would every night, there were two ministers of King Bimbisara, or maybe King Pasenadi. They would turn their heads towards the Buddha wherever he was every night before they slept. I don't think that would be too easy to do in a involved relationship unless your partner was on board. But as a lay sangha, I think not being shy about the shrine, making a point of chanting when you get together, just frame your period of practice with a chant on either side. It just takes 5 minutes, and yet it really helps the meditation. Take the 5 precepts together and the refuges. If you gather as a lay sangha, don't be afraid to bow. And there's other kind of fun things. For example, there's a homage to the Buddha called ETP So Bhagawa. We sometimes chant that 108 times. It takes about, if you do all 3 Buddha Dhamma Sangha, it takes about 2 hours. But you can get going really fast. It's very fun. So that's occasionally something good to do. On Buddhist holy days, light candles and circle around a holy place 3 times, even if it's just your house. Yeah, those are some of the things I can think of. One other thing is to, having a little mala with you that you can wear around your wrist, just a little reminder of who you are as a Buddhist. That can be helpful. And yeah, I think that's enough for now. Oh, one more thing on the ritual. It's beautiful in Thailand. They'll offer flowers to their Buddha shrine every day. Flowers, candles, incense. Flowers are sila, morality, which is because the Buddha said the scent of morality travels even against the wind. Incense is 1 point, so it's samadhi. And candles produce light, that's wisdom. But yeah, take time to offer flowers to your shrine. Bante, do you have any advice or comments to practicing with more of an emphasis on the suttas within a more orthodox context? And how to skillfully navigate and make the most of that situation? Kala, might be helpful if you defined orthodox. Do you mean a more EBT approach, like early Buddhist texts? Or do you mean like Orthodox Christianity? I'll let you type that in. I'll move on to the next question for a second. I'm feeling depressed and overwhelmed by the complexity of some of the Dharma conversations. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm ever uh, part of making you feel that way. Don't worry. Um, it's really enough to come back to the simplicity of the practice. Uh, and often that's what we need, is just coming back to your center point. Um, Maybe it's silly of me to even say this and kind of counter, referencing another teaching, which might feel complex, but I hope not. Um, there's a really complex system of psychology called Paticca Samuppada, the 12 links of dependent origination. But the Buddha always pairs that, or often, with a teaching ta, which means this, thusness, um, which could be translated as it's like this, it's just this much, only this. It's Long Pour Sumedho's admonition to just, whenever something comes up, just say, oh, it's like this. And that's helpful, because what it indicates to me is, even in tandem with the most complex system of psychology he ever expounded, Paticca Samuppada, ignorance leading to sankhara, leading to consciousness, leading to name and form, leading to etc. The Buddha held right there on the other side, ta, it's like this. There's a great sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where he holds up this pairing, and just to remember that if it feels like too much, just come back to it's like this. Just come back to your breath, and that might really be where your practice needs to be. Is just the heart, just sitting with that and not being ashamed of it. There can be this push to kind of catch up, to keep up, to know the terms. That's not the essential aspect here. And it's not everyone's inclination. Some people love to play with these suttas and to think about them. Some people, you got enough to think about. Just all you want to do when you come back to the cushion is sit down, breathe, be with yourself. It's like this. Spread some loving kindness, listen to your heart. That's fine. And really honoring that side. It does not mean your practice is less at all. I know plenty of practitioners who love to wax on about the suttas. I'm probably one of them. Um, but that's not the core of the practice. Okay. Jay Kala, so sorry, Sandra, this is going to be a bit intellectual. So Kala is clarifying her question by saying how to approach the EBT approach within Orthodox Theravada. EBT is defined as early Buddhist text, for the record. It's the original suttas, specifically the core of the suttas identified as the earliest strata of the Buddhist teachings, clarified by comparative studies between Chinese Sanskrit texts and the Pali. And how to practice within an Orthodox Theravada context. So, first of all, it's important to know what Theravada means. The school of the elders, which is a counterpoint to Mahayana, is in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and it is based in the Pali Suttas. It's also got a lot of things that aren't in the suttas in it, and that's something we have to begin to understand. So the Theravada relies very heavily on a text called the Visuddhimagga, which is the Path of Purification, written about 4th century AD by a monk called Buddhaghosa. It's brilliant, but it's not the suttas. And a lot of Theravada actually comes from that. The EBT movement, which is kind of recent and has been spearheaded largely by Bhante and Alio, tries to trace back to the original suttas and really put aside a lot of those other things that happened later. If you're trying to practice with the EBTs within the Theravada, a sort of orthodox Theravada, like say you live in Sri Lanka, you're going to Sri Lankan monasteries, Burmese monasteries, Thai monasteries, all of these emphasize elements that aren't EBT. First, just be very respectful. You can kind of get EBT supremacy, where you're like, the Buddha didn't say that. That was written 1,000 years later. There's immense wisdom in these texts, and many of them were written by arahants. The Abhidhamma, for example, was most likely not written by the Buddha, but it has its basis in the some of Sariputta's, Venerable Sariputta's teachings at the end of the Digha Nikaya, and it was very likely much of it was written by enlightened beings. So don't dismiss these things out of hand. Use them as skillful means, but use the EBTs to simplify back to the basics, because often that's what they're most useful for. Is you find out that when you come back to what the Buddha actually said, there's just a simplicity and clarity. For example, in the four foundations of mindfulness, the fourth foundation, mindfulness of Dhammas, which is the categories we lay over experience. So looking at our experience in terms of the aggregates, the khandhas, of the sense bases, the Four Noble Truths, all of these get put into that fourth foundation in the classic Theravada Pali texts. If you look at the EBTs in comparative studies, they reveal that all that was in that fourth foundation at the time of the Buddha was the 7 factors of awakening and the 5 hindrances. So the 7 bright qualities and states of joy, of mindfulness, of investigation of dhammas, of rapture, of tranquility, and so on, versus the hindrances to calm, such as sensual desire, aversion, restlessness, sloth, and doubt. And that's it. So it was just this much. The fourth foundation was look at your experience and see if your mind states are dark or bright. Which ones are dark and which ones are bright? What's there right now? It wasn't look at the khandhas, then look at the ayatana, the sense bases, then look at all these other things. So what I do is I hold both, one in either hand, and this is actually where Clear Mountain is situated, is you have one hand holding the Theravada orthodoxy, the Visuddhimagga, the later texts, the tradition, and then you have one hand holding the ancient texts, and you hold them respectfully. You don't do it contentiously, but where it's useful, come back to what the Buddha said. And then when you have a chance to bring up these other texts with care and respect, if they're useful, then use them as skillful means and give them deep respect. My apologies, Venerable. Depressed wasn't something I typed. Autocorrect, dang. It was asking if it's okay to just stay simple, but you answered, nailed it. It is okay. And yes, autocorrect is not very Buddhist. I was at an ordination ceremony, and Longpo Pasno was saying that in America, we still don't quite understand monks because the word samana, which means monk in Pali, autocorrects to Santana. Okay, great. I think we have to wrap up. It's great to see everyone. Those who want may stay on from 6:45 to 7:30 at a Zoom session, which I'll post the link into the chat. You're also welcome to go to our website and find that link halfway down the page to Wednesday's Zoom. I'll also just mention here that on We'll have the Saturday gathering as usual this Saturday, live streamed and Zoom. You can find the Zoom link on our website. We've just incorporated that. Oh, Hawk, your question is good. I will answer that before I sign on to Zoom. This Sunday, we'll also have a afternoon session with the Aya Santusika and Aya Chittananda are visiting. So from 3 to 5 p.m., if you're in Seattle, come to First Baptist. If you're not, you can live stream and Zoom into it, and it'll be amazing to see the Ayas teach. It's really a gift to have them. If you're in Seattle, you can come in person, and you can come to a morning sort of gathering we're having in Volunteer Park at 9:30 a.m. with them, just for a more intimate Q&A. So feel free to tap in if you'd like. We also have a day-long the following Saturday with Aya Soma, Bhante Sudaso, Ajahn Kovilo, and myself, Saturday, July 30th. And all details are on the website. So there's a lot going on. It's all there on the website. Hope you join us. Hawk, the EBTs, early Buddhist texts, are more or less the suttas you know. The difference would just be bringing in and incorporating insights and books by Bhante Analayo and Ajahn Brahmali specifically, along with Ajahn Nisabho, to parse out which ones are most authentic. But it would basically mean relying mostly on the canon. And then supplementing your view of the canon with those other sort of books and viewpoints. For example, I think Bhante Analayo has an entire book parsing out the reliability of different elements of the Majjhima Nikaya. The best way, I forgot to mention this, there's a book called The Difference Between Theravada and Early Buddhist Texts, something like that, by Bhante Sujato. It's very good. That will parse out and give this distinction in detail.